Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to Project Manager Part 6. In this particular video, we're going to be showing you additional features on tasks. We've added task type, task notes, completed on an actual days, as opposed to estimated day for each and every task. We've added additional color formatting, and we have added some brand new features. I can't wait to show it to you, so let's get started. All right, thank you so much for joining me. We've got a lot to cover. This is going to be the Project Manager Part 6. Based on your requests, your suggestions, we have added additional features to tasks, and I can't wait to show that to you. We've got a few more features. We've added additional color conditional formatting, so we're going to show that to you. But of course, before we get started, if you do like these videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and of course the notifications, and that way each and every Tuesday you will be notified of a brand new training video where we go over something amazing in Excel and we bring to life brand new projects and products. All right, let's get started. In this particular video, we've got a lot. In fact, I've added task type here, which is actually a drop-down list, so you can create any different type of tasks that you want. In fact, that is also based on a brand new table in the setup screen that we're calling task types. So this is a dynamic table using a dynamic range, and of course adding these items here is automatically going to reference those in the drop down list here under task types. So it is a dynamic. We're using a dynamic named range. We'll show that to you. I have added these additional features, and of course I am now a task takes up 2 lines. So we're going to show you how we format those and add conditional formatting to each of those lines. We have also added the actual days, and of course the actual days is now based on the final completion date, so that when we update the completion date, we're going to get the actual days. So we have automated calculated days on this. So if we change the day here, changes something a little bit more understandable, we are going to get automatically the actual days of the tasks that we can track as the actual opposed to the estimated days. And of course the estimated days is basically based on the start date and any type of estimated days that a user would enter. So that's all tracked, it's all remembered. And in fact, we've also have this amazing task completion here where you select on a specific task and you can automatically set the task completion rate, whether it's 50%, 100%, or 0%. And I'm going to show you exactly how we created that. In fact, we saw that in the last training, but we didn't get to exactly how we created that. So we're going to go ahead and show you that right away today. All right, so let's get started on the training. We've got a lot to show you. I've also added the ability to add in the completed on. So when we click on a completed on and we click on a day here, it's going to mark every single task completed automatically, of course, any task that was not already completed. So we're going to show you how we did that as well. All right, let's get started. The first thing we're going to show you is this really amazing completed on task completion percentage. And basically all this is a grouped shape. So it's a group, the name of the group is called task status group. And we're displaying that automatically when we select any type of column in column O here, as long as there's a value. So if we select one that doesn't contain any kind of a value here in the main row, nothing's going to be displayed. However, if we do select a specific task where there is a value, where there's value within the task name, it is going to show up. This way we only get it to show up for those tasks that contain values in the task name. So the task name is required for each and every task. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to have the ability for the user to quickly and easily set a specific task completion percentage, whether of course it's 0% or whether it's anywhere from to 100% or 90%. And of course that is going to be color coordinated based on the percentage. So we have that. So how do we do that? Well, all this little bit of a homemade slicer is essentially just a few lines, a few bars, and a few text boxes. So that all I've done is assign macros to these text boxes. So this right here, this is just a text box with 20. And then I've assigned a macro to this text box. Same thing, this is just a line. And these are just lines that have color. So if we look at this format shape here, I've clicked the format shape, we'll pull it up. And if we see the line color, all we've done is set a 3-stop gradient here, gradient with 3 different stops, starting out at white, going all the way to green, and in the middle is yellow. So that's a pretty simple thing. You can do this yourself. You can set these or change these colors to however you like. So it's a relatively easy. So all that is a line that's been color graded. You can add the thickness. And then so all it is made up of text boxes. Now, if you remember these three buttons, we've had these task completion buttons. One that we've just made them part of this completion group. So I've taken the buttons that I showed you before, whether it's in process, not started, or completed on green, and I've automated them part of the group, part of this group. So that way, when a user selects task complete, it's automatically set to 100%. So you don't have to click the 100. You can also click this green checkbox, and that's going to make it 100%. So again, all this particular group is made up of individual shapes, very basic shapes, and then I've assigned macros to those shapes. Let's go ahead and take a look at the macro. For example, if we click on the 10 text box here, and I right click that and I click assign macro, and we'll see that the macro assigned to this is called task completion 10, task complete 10, and that's basically a macro that assigns the 10% complete for that. Let's take a look at those macros real quick so we can see exactly how that's done. Into the developers tab, if you don't have the developers tab, you can, of course can click on the file and the options here, and you can see here in the Customize ribbon, you'll have the ability to select the Developers tab. You can also select Alt F11 as a shortcut key to get into the Visual Basic. And now we have task macros as a module here. We're going to focus on the task macros because that's based on the tasks. So when we double click that, we will see many different macros here. In fact, we have ones that are sub-task completed 0, 10, 20, they're all relatively the same, all the way up to 100. 10 different macros, 11 different macros. And basically each one of these, what we're going to do is we need to check on B8. We don't want, for each one of these, we need to make sure that B8 has a value. And what is B8? B8 is our task row. We keep track of the row that we've selected. So every time we select a row, we want to make sure the row that we've selected, or actually the row above it. So for example, if we select row 9, I want to make sure that this shows 8. If we select 8, it's also going to show 8. So I want the top row, that is the even row, and I'll show you how we do that very shortly. In fact, let me show you that now because I'll probably skip it a little bit later on. Into the project manager, on sheet macros. On sheet, we want selection change, right? We want something to happen when we select it. So we're focused on selection change down here. This, remember, this here is called worksheet change. Right up here is worksheet change, so that when we actually make a change to a cell, and then down below is called selection change. That's all that means, is we want something to run when the user actually makes a selection. So when we do make a selection to certain cells, we want something to happen. When we make a selection, when the user makes a selection, anywhere from K4 to P26, we want something to happen. And what we want to do is I want to get the even row. The basic idea is if they select 9, I want to put 8 here. If they select 7, I want to put 6 here. If they select 6 here, just put 6. So this is where I want, let me just select that. This is where B8 is where I want that value to appear, that even value. And to get that even value, we just need just a little bit of code. We can use the mod 2, and what the mod 2 is going to return to us is the dividend of an even number. So basically, if they select 9, it's going to display a 1 here. If they select 7, it's going to display a 1 here. This is going to be mod 2 is going to be 1. And of course, if they select an even number, the mod 2 is going to be 0. So what we're saying is if they've selected an even row, then B8 equals the exact target row. However, if B8 equals otherwise it's an odd row, right? Otherwise it's an odd row, and then B8 equals the target row minus 1. So this just one line of code allows us to get the even row automatically above whatever one they've selected if they have not selected an even row. So that's important. We need to know that, and that's of course going to go into B8, and we need to know it because we're making changes to that row. When I make a change, when I select something, I'm making a change. I need to know what row, whether they've selected this one here, right? Or whether they've selected this one here. I want the same thing to appear, but I want that value to appear in this case, 08. 08. So if they've selected 08, I need that value to go into 08. But if they selected 09, I also need it to go into 08. So we want to make sure that 8 is the value regardless. 8 is the value regardless. Okay, so that's how we go. So I need to make sure that B8 actually contains a value. That's very important. If it doesn't, there's nothing we can do. When we go outside, B8 is automatically cleared, right? So I want to make sure that always when they select something in here, we're focused on that specific task, and we can use that, track that task via the B8 cell, which lets us know that row 6. So that helps us. That's going to guide us. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that B8 actually contains a value. If not, we're just going to exit the sub. Assuming that B8 does contain a value, we want sheet 1 O. Remember, O is the column we're focused on, and sheet 1 B8 value. This is the row number, right? O and the row number equals 0. Why 0? Well, that's because for task completed, 0%. So it would be 0 in this case. And then, of course, we are going to display, we can turn the task status group shape off. This is a group. Remember, I just went over that with you. That group, we want to turn that off. We want to hide it. So we can do hide it. And then, of course, I want to mark the task as pending. I want to run a macro that marks this task pending. So what is that macro? Let's just take a look at that. That macro will make sure B8 is not empty, and it's going to set the task row to B8. And in this case, we're going to say the task row, assuming it's not empty, K in the task row is going to equal, in fact, this pound sign right here, this pound sign, that is going to tell us that the task is pending. And it's going to, in the Wingdings font, it's going to display this icon right here, which is the box with no fill in it. That is what we want to display. And I want to display it in P and whatever's in B8, P8 in this case. So that's how we get that task pending, right? So here we have P and the task row equals this icon. That is our pending. In progress, we're going to show this as we've been over before. That is the filled. This is the Wingdings font for that filled square. And of course, then we have the complete, which is going to be the R. So we have those 3. So of course, if the task completed is 0%, we want to show pending. However, if it's anywhere from 10 all the way up to 90, we want to show the task in progress. And then, of course, if it's 100, we actually want to run the task complete, right? So those are those 3 macros, task complete. All that we're doing is really changing the percentage to 100 just in case. One will give us 100%. Why is that? Because we formatted this cell to 100, to the percentage. So this is a percentage format. So simply putting a 1 in there is going to make it look like 100% because it's been formatted as a 1. That's why we can just enter 1 here and have it display as 100%. So that automatically, if we change it to 90 or click on 90, it's going to change it to 90, which the value is 0.9 or 90% based on how it's formatted. And of course, also when we change it to 90, the status is going to go back to here, which is the color filled square, which means it's in progress or in process. That task is not completed yet. So we've got those in relation. So now we see exactly how we get that. And of course, all I've done is really assign each one of these a different macro. So when we click on the 50, we click the assign macro, we'll see the task complete 50 has been assigned. So basically I've got 11 different macros here based on each one of these settings. So it's like basically a little bit of a homemade slicer. And the reason I did that is just because I wanted to, show you how I wanted to make something a little bit more visually pleasing, and I also wanted to add these icons along with their macros associated so that you could just simply mark it complete or click 100. Gives the user the ability to have additional features. All right, moving on. Now, as you see, before we had a single line for a task, but now we've added additional. We've added task type, task notes, completed on in the actual days. Now, as you'll see, this is just one row. This is row 3, but what I did is I just put a line here. As you can see, this is just a line, and this line is just a line that helps us break it apart to make it look like there we have it. So it gives us those split headers, which is a nice look, so user can easily see which is which. So we have our task type, we have our task notes, we have our completed on date, we have our actual days, which is automated here, and of course our completed percentage and status is automatic as well. So we have both of those. So we've got that. So we've also added additional fields in our project tasks. So if we look into our project tasks, we now have a larger table with more ability. We now have additional 2 task type and task notes in here. We have a start date. We've got the estimated days. We've got actual days, and we have completion percentage, status, estimated end date, and completed on. And the reason we have both is now we can know which tasks go over or under. So now we have the ability to add a lot more features so that we know when tasks go over or under. And of course, we can add reporting on one day so we know how many tasks got completed on time, how many tasks got completed before the estimate date, and of course how many tasks are completed after. So this gives us a lot of ability to add a reporting onto that shows us which tasks are done by who and how much, so we know exactly what resource and who's doing tasks on time. And if that's something you want to see, a different reporting, please let me know in the comments and I'll try and get to that, because I think that would be a powerful feature. Okay, so we've added those additional features onto the project tasks, and now we see we have the same criteria that we just moved it over. And of course, our results, our filter results, are now of course added to that as well, because we need to bring the filter results over. And so basically what I've done is I'm going to run the advanced filter, but now we're bringing over more results, and we're bringing that into the project manager. So when we load a specific project, it's going to load tasks. It's going to load one single task in two different lines, just like we have here. So we have two different tasks here. We also have, in this one, we have two different tasks. Just by selecting, it's going to load those tasks up. And we also have for a lot of tasks. So you see each task takes up a lot of different rows. So we have the ability to display more data in the same area. And let's take a look and see how we got this update. Now we went over how to load tasks, but we made a lot of changes to it. So I'd like to go over that macro again so you can see just how we load tasks. So back into the developers tab, let's take a look under the task load. So I believe that's into project macros, because we're loading the tasks as part of that project. And here it is, load tasks. So again, when we're loading the project load, we're going to run a macro inside that project, and that we're going to load the tasks inside that. When we're loading project, we're then going to run a separate macro called project load tasks, and that's going to load all of the tasks associated with that specific project based on that project number. So let's take a look at that macro, and we'll go through it just once again. It's not too difficult, but I wanted to go through it again. We're going to locate the last task row. We need that when we run our advanced filter, the last results row. And of course, the results row, we're going to be looping through it. So we now need to know which row. So we're going to be running a few loops now. One, I want to run a loop, so I want to keep count actually of what task we're on the project task row. But I also need to know when we have our results of our tasks, we need to start at row 3 and run all the way to the last row. So we need to loop through those, because I need to bring this information over in the first row, and I need to bring this information over into the second row, the first row and the second row. So we need to bring all of that, right? And again, let's look at that. The first row here all the way to Q, and then the second row, which is going to be right here. So we need to bring that over, and we're going to loop through the results so that we can bring that data in here. All right, so back into the code we go. When we have the project task row, that's going to keep track of the row on our project screen. And of course, our project task row is going to start out at 4. Why is it going to start at 4? Because we start here. 4 is the first row of our project tasks. We're going to go all the way down, so we want to keep track of the row. So we want to set the initial row as to row 4, because that's our first task is going to be displayed. All right, back into the VBA. With sheet 1, we're going to be primarily focused on sheet 1, so we can use that as a with sheet 1. And B2, we want to set the project load to true, so make sure nothing else happens when we are loading those tasks in. And of course, I want to clear the contents of any existing tasks. Any existing task, I want to clear the contents of those. So we're going to clear these fields out right here, starting at K4 all the way. We're going to go down to Q and then 26. So I'm going to run down here, and we've added some additional data mapping all the way down here, which I'll show you down here. That's how we load text. In fact, I'll keep this on there. I want to show you how we do the data mapping. So I'm going to keep this is just a picture, and I'll show you how that works. All right, so what we're doing is we're just clearing all the tasks. The first thing before we load new tasks, we want to make sure that we clear any remaining tasks, and we want to make sure that we include these row numbers. So we're going to include column Q in that clear as well. So we're going to clear all that up all the way to Q26. Next up, I want to set the project number, the criteria. If you remember, now it's located in P3, and it's going to come from I4. So that means we pull in that project I4. I4 is where we are project number, which is right here. And I'm going to take this project number, I'm going to put it right here into P3. So we're going to bring it right there. So that way we have our criteria. So that means I want to know all of the tasks associated with this specific project. So it's going to return all those in for example, if we got the criteria project 1, it's going to return all the results for project 1. Okay, so we've got that down. Let's continue on with our code. So we've placed the project number in I4. That's for our criteria. And next, I want to clear any results. It's very important. We're going to clear the results again. So we want to clear any previous results, clear all that out. So that's going to start, of course, at T3 and go all the way to AE in a large row down there, just to clear them out to make sure that we get those cleared out. Next up, we're going to set the last task row. We need the last row of the, actually last, this should say last task row, We're going to run our advanced filter. We've been through this before, but basically I'm going to update the criteria P2. We've been through advanced filter so many times, so I want to move through it quickly. And our results are going to go here. So the newest part here is how we deal with the data once we get it in. If it's less than 3, the last results row, we just want to make sure to go. That means there's no task. So we want to make sure to skip this if there's no task. So we're going to run a loop. Now we're ready to run a loop. I'm going to run a loop, as I had mentioned, starting in row 3 all the way to the last. In this case, it's 8, the last. And for each loop, what I basically want to do is I want to take, not including the project number, we don't need that task name. I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy this over to the first. I'm going to go 1 row down and copy this over. So again, our project row starting at 4, we're going to take it, going to paste that right in here, and we're going to take the values, the second section, and paste it right here. Then we're going to skip 2 on our project row and to go to the next one. So that's how we're going to do that within VBA. All right, so we know our project row starts at 4. We got that. So K and the project task row through Q and the project task row equals sheet 7 U through AA. Again, let's look at that again. K all the way through Q equals, what is it going to equal? U through AA. So we're taking that, all I'm doing is taking this data and bringing it right here on the first row. The next sentence of our code, what we're going to do is we're going to take, it's going to say K through N of the project task row plus 1, right? The project task row is 4. So we're focused on row 5 right now. So we need to make sure we add 1 row. So K project task row plus 1 through N equals what? Equals AB through AE of our results row. So let me show you what that looks like in the code. It looks right here. K in the project task row plus 1 and in the project task row plus 1 equals, remember, this is with sheet 1, this is with sheet 7. Sheet 7, AB in the results row through AE. That's all we have to do. And then, of course, next we have to increase the project task row by 2 because each task contains 2 rows. So we need to add 2 more to the project task row. So that does. And next up, we're going to loop through these. We're going to go through this as many as there are until the last results row. So we're going to loop. In this case, it's 8. So it's going to do that 5 times, go through. And then once we're set, we are going to set B2 back to false, which sets the project load to false, and then we're going to end. So that's all we really need to do to get that information displayed into the project manager here. And now let's take a look at the conditional formatting. We've got a few conditional formatting. We looked at it before, but I want to look at it again because a few changed with these alternate rows. A little bit has changed. So if we go into the home, and then conditional formatting, and we're going to manage rules. And let's take a look at some of the rules. The first rule I have is K4. Let's edit that rule and take a look at that. K4 does not equal blank. In that case, if the K4 does not equal blank, I want borders on both sides. I want to put the borders on both sides. So that's important because we want to have borders all the way through. If not, if there's no data, right? If there's no data, I don't want any borders showing up here. Okay, so that's important. So we've got that there. All right, let's look at some of the additional rules. Again, back into the conditional formatting. And we'll also see that we now have 2 lines for the blue. But we've only selected. Of course, that's going to be based on a few conditions. Let's take a look at that for the selected line. K4, of course, K, and of course when we don't put the absolute dollar sign below in front of the 4, we'll see that that's going to carry over for every single line because we have not made that absolute. The row is not absolute. So as long as that does not equal blank and B8 equals the row minus 1. Now if you remember, B8 is our selected row. B8 equals the row minus 1. The current row, what this is going to do is select the current row. That means if we have whatever the current row is, it's going to add 1, minus 1. So it's going to cover this row here. B8, right? If we remember, B8 is 4. So in that case, if the selected row is minus 1 or plus 1, we'll see that it's going to cover both rows. Let's look at that again so it's not too confusing. We've got two conditions for the blue. We've got a lighter one and then a darker one. And you'll notice here our top row is a little bit lighter and our bottom row is darker. So let's take a look at the darker one here and edit the row, and we'll see that the row is minus 1, 1 less, right? And then we'll take a look at the lighter one, and we'll see that that's B8 equals row. That's very simple, right? B8, very simple, because that means that's going to cover for B8. But what about this one, plus 1? Why is it minus 1 and not plus 1? Let's take a look at that. Okay, and that's because if our selected row is 9, we want to color 8. So we want to make sure to cover both of those regardless of the row that we select. This covers both regardless of whether we're selecting row 4 or row 5. It's going to color both row 4 and 5. We're going to give it that dark color blue with the white font that covers both of the rows. So as we change it, it's going to change itself. And I did the same idea with both the light green and the darker green, which covers both of the green. And the conditions on this rule, of course, are if P4 equals R, then we want that light green. But what about if the row above it, if we edit the row, P4, again, P4 equals R, but if you'll notice they start in different rows. The darker one starts in row 5, and that is the difference because of the starting row, because this is P4, it's going to color the one after it, right? One down, because look, this one starts in 4, this one starts in 5. That's going to offset the row 1 below. It's going to offset the row 1 below. So we use this. So based on the applies to, we can offset the rows easily so it colors the one down below the row, down below the affected row. This is the one where we're applying it to, the rule applies to P4, but we're applying it to K5. So we're starting in 5. You see, that means we're going to color the one right below it. That's how we get that conditional formatting. And of course, if K4 is blank, then we want to color it blue. That would be used for all these down here. That's how we get to show only a dynamic table, only the rows with values. Of course, if we were just to add a value here, it would quickly show you a specific white so that it colors those, so it's easy. In fact, I'll probably add additional so that we always have one row white, so we can do that. So let's take a look at that conditional formatting manage rules. So now when we have two formats. We have and K4 and K5 equal blank. So when those two are blank, we're going to color it blue. And this way, now we have the ability, now the first row is always going to be blank, so that we have the ability to enter a new one that's automatically allows the user to enter it, so they know that they can enter a task because it's in white. So that helps guide the user. So that is the conditional formatting rules that we have had. Now also, I showed you another feature that we have, and that is the ability to mark all of the specific tasks complete when we have a job that's complete. So for example, this job still has a few tasks that are incomplete. However, if we add a completed on, let's just add it here, automatically they move to 100%. Let's take a look and see how we did that. Into developers, back in Visual Basic, this is going to be on sheet. So this is focused on our project manager, and this is actually when we make a change, right? So when we make a change, we want something to happen. So here is it, worksheet change. So what do we want to happen? Well, there's a specific cell that only when we change this cell, E12, do we want something to happen. Only when we change E12. So we want to focus just on that. So let's take a look at this. If not intersection E12 is nothing. That means when we actually make a change to E12, when we are not intersection is nothing. Those cancel each other out. That means when we make a change to E12. And of course, if the target value does not equal empty, we're only focused on when the user enters a value, then I want something to happen, right? So if they clear the cell and I don't want anything to happen, but if they enter a date there, I do want something to happen. We also want to dimension the last task row and the task list row. Why do we want to dimension both of those longs? Well, first thing, I want to loop through all of these tasks, right? I want to loop through all of them and make sure they're all set to 100%. So to do that, I need to get the last task row. In this case, the last is 6, right, or 7. And the first one, of course, is 4. So I need to keep track of which one we're on and the last one. So we need to define both of those as long so that we can loop through that. Of course, the last task row is going to be K53 up, and of course, if K, we also want the even number of K. So for example, if the last task row here in this case is 7, I want to make sure it goes to 6. I want the even portion of that, because the last task is really starting on 6. This high scale, this one is part of the task. It's part of that task. These two are on the same exact task. So if the last task is 7, I need to get the even number of that, and that mod 2 will allow us to do that so that it returns 6. So we do that right here, minus the last row, whatever last row, the minus mod 2. So for example, if the last row is an odd number like 7, subtracting 1, this will return 1. This will return 1 here. So the mod of the last row will return 1. So when we subtract 7 minus 1, we get 6. So because I want to loop through the task, so we want 6, we don't want 7. We want 8, we don't want 9, and so on. Of course, if the last task row is less than 4, that means there's no tasks, so there's nothing else to do. In that case, we would go all the way here to no tasks. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to stop the calculations. That's a macro that's going to set automatic calculations to manual and, of course, screen updating to false. We do that because it's going to act a lot faster and run the code a lot faster. Next thing, we're going to set our loop. Our task row we've dimensioned is long. We've done it up here. We're going to set that all the way from 4 to the last task row. And we're going to step 2, right? Each task is 2 rows now, so we need to step 2. That's going to skip 2 each one. So for example, if it's 6, it's going to go from 4 to 6. If it's 8, 4, 6, 8, and so on and so forth. All right. For example, I want to make sure that O in the task value is not equal 1. That means if it's not set to 100% currently, if our completion is not 100, then we do want to set it. Then we do want to set it to 100. So in that case, 1 or 100, since it's formatted as a percent, it's going to set the completion to 100%. The next thing I want to do is I want to set the task status to complete. We can do that with R. R is the icon that shows that checkbox, right? That's actually an R. So if we look at that and we see that completed here, we'll see that that's R. That is the R in the Wingdings font. Remember, that's Wingdings 2 actually. So the R is actually the checkbox in Wingdings 2. So in fact, all we need to do is enter the R and it's going to show up as this checked box here in status. So we want to make sure that that's entered into P and the task row. So P and the task row, we're going to set that up. So we've got that right there into P and the task row. All right, next up in our code, we have that. So that's just in case it was set at not complete, currently not complete. All right, so that way if it was not complete, now it's more complete. The next thing I want to do is I want to update the completed and actual days. So we need to update that. What is that? Well, I want to update this date because it's now completed, and I want to update the date based on whatever date the user entered here. So for example, if we entered 28, I want to update that 28, but I only want to update it if there's no value in here. If the user has already marked a completed on, we don't want to change any existing ones. We only want to change those that have not had a date. If there is no completion date and they make a change, then we want to update it. Then we want to update it, but we don't want to mess or change any existing completed on days. So the first thing we have to do is check if M and the task row plus 1, so that here's our task row plus 1 would be right here. Does it contain a value? If it does not, then go ahead and put in whatever completed on date here. So that's what we do within the next few lines of code. If M and the task row plus 1 equals empty, right? If it doesn't have a date, then update the completed on and the actual day. So we want to do two things. I also want to update the number of days here, the actual days. And that's going to be based on the start date plus the completed on date. All we're going to do is just do a simple subtraction. We're going to subtract this completed on date from the start date minus the start date, and we're going to get our number of days. In this case, it's 14. All right, so we can do that with just these lines of code. M1, assuming that the condition is that the M in the task row plus 1 is empty, we can then update it with the target value. The target value is the value you just changed, and that's the completed on date in E12. That's completed on date. Next thing, I want to set the number of days. Where are the days located? The days are located M in the task row. So here, right here, N in the task row plus 1. We're going to update that, but we want to make sure first that there's actually a start date. We can't subtract anything if there's no start date, right? If there's no start date, we don't know how many days. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure there's actually a value in M4, M in the project task row. We need to make sure there's actually a start date before that we actually subtract January 28th minus 14. We need to make sure that there's actually value. So we need to check that. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to make sure that M in the task row does not equal empty. We need a start date. That's very important. If there's a start date, then N in the task row equals, remember, this N in the task row plus 1 is the number of days that it was completed. And it's going to equal a simple math. The target value, of course, that is the completed on date minus the start date. Again, there it is. The completed date minus the start date, that's going to get us the number of days. And we want to place the number of days right there in N in the task row plus 1. That is the task row here. N is the column here, plus 1 is going to get us that 14. And if we delete that and we decide to add another one, and we just add a different day right here, we can put it on, let's say, the 26th, and it's going to change it to 12. So you see, it's automatically calculated the number of days. All right, now that we have the information here, that's great, but how do we do it? I need to get that information right here. I need to get that down here and update that information right here. That's very important, right? Because if it's one thing to get it in the screen, but we need it in the main database. I need to be updating this into that main database. So that's really, really important. So how do we do that? Well, we do that with the next couple lines of code. So let's go ahead and walk you through that. And back into the project manager, and of course back into the code. Now we need to update the task list database. That, of course, is on sheet 7, project tasks. So we need to update that database. And of course, we need to make sure that we have the row. And as you know, the rows of that database is always here. So when we made those changes to the completed on date and the actual days, we're making that change to row 23 of the project tasks. And if we look down to row 23, this is the specific row that we're affecting. These are the days that we changed. These are the actual days, 12, and the date that we changed, the completed on date. So I need to get that information right in here. So we can do that with just a few lines of code. And of course, we can do that down here. And we'll see down here that sheet 7, so for example, as long as it's not empty, we have the row. The task list row, the row is Q in the task row, right? Our task list row, 23 here, that's our task list row. Where do we get that 23 from? We get it from right here, Q and the task list row, 23 or 33 in this case. Because when we load the task, that row is placed right here. Remember that, because we need the row. So when we save this information back to the database, we need that row. We know the column. For example, we know that we're going to be saving the column if we want to complete it on date. We know it's going to go in column L, and we know if the actual days is going to go in column H, and so forth. So always, since we know the column and we know the row, we can get that placed in there in the right spot. So we can do that with the following lines of code. We know H in the task list row. Remember, this is sheet 7. This is our database here. What are we going to place there in H? We're going to play the days completed. And of course, that's simply N and the task row +1. So that's going to place our days into our database. We need that there because the next time we load that task, we want all the correct information to load in. So that's very important. We need to set sheet 7 and I, that is the completion, to 100. The completion rate, 1 or 100%. We need to place that in column I. Column I is right here. We need that completion and we know where to place it. We know the column and now we know the row, so we can quickly get it placed there. And of course, the last thing is we want the task status, and that of course is in column J along with the task list row, and that R, that is the icon that's going to show it's completed. So we get all three, the days completed, the completion to 100%, and the task status to complete. All those three, the database is updated. And now next up, we also want to update the completion date if none exists. I only want to update that completion date if none exists. If sheet 7L value equals empty, then I'm going to update it. If sheet 7L, the completed is on L, right? So if we look here, L is the completed date. I want to make sure that only this gets updated if it's empty. So we don't want to replace it if it's not empty. So assuming it is empty in the database, we can then get it replaced. Then if it is empty, then sheet 7L in the task row, our database, equals the target value. So that's going to automatically update the completion date. So now we have all of that information updated in our task base. And that way, so when we load it up, it gets saved automatically. So for example, if I make a change, which I just did, and then I load another project with different tasks, right, all of that disappears. But I need to pull that information back. So it's going to pull that project back up, if I remember correctly. What project were we on? This one here, I believe. So it's going to pull that information back up automatically right here. So that way it loads up automatically. As you can see now, 12 and 16. So then of course, if we make any changes to that, it's automatically pull up those changes. This way we can reload different data and pull the data from our database automatically. All right, so we got that covered. Let's see what's next up on our list. We have added, of course, automatic actual days. We've covered that, the project tasks. We also have a dynamic named range on the setup. We'll just take a quick look at that. Under task types, I've created a dynamic named range, and then I've set that here, that data validation, into the project manager. So if we look up here, we'll see here under task type, under the data and data validation, validated, we'll see that it's named range called task type, and that's linked to this. And of course, we can locate, that's a dynamic name as I showed you. So when we look under the name manager and we scroll down and we look for task type here and tab over, we'll see that it covers this area. And we use offset for this dynamic named range. We're going to start at M4, and then what we're going to do is we're going to count the values, all the values from M4 to M33. We're going to count those. So based on the number of values, we're going to create a dynamic named range in the first column. And of course, we only have one column selected, so that's fine. So that means as we add data, that named range is also going to add data. And so if we have another value, it's automatically going to add to that named range. So now when we look in the formulas and go into the name manager, again, task type, we will see that now it includes that skill, the last skill. And of course, since it's linked, we also see that we now have our skill level 0 skill here. So that's automatically been linked as well. So we get that additional feature. We have so it becomes dynamic. Of course, task notes, you can put in any test notes you want here. Now, of course, when we make a change to test notes, we want this information also saved to row 23. When I make a note and we go back into 23, we want to make sure those notes are saved right here in column E. So how did we do that? Well, that's also in VBA, and that of course also is under the project manager because we're making on-sheet changes, and we're going to use data mapping. And I've data mapping, that's going to help us because we've got a lot of columns now. So let's take a look at some of the data mapping. Remember, we've got a set of columns here that we want to add to. A would be column 1, B would be column 2, C would be column 3, and so on. So what I've done is I've taken a little screenshot of this and I've pasted it right here, all the way down here. So this is just a screenshot. And this is going to help guide us, right? We know that column A is 1 and B is task name. So what I want to do is I want to use data mapping. If I make a change here, I want that change right here in row 20, column 2. I want that change right, let's take a look right here, column 2, email client. I want that change right here. So when we go back into the project manager I want email clients. So if I make a change called email clients, I want that change automatically into project tasks. I want it to change it to email clients. Of course, I know the row. We know where the rows, but what column do we change? What column? Well, I want it to show column 2 because it's B, and I want to make that change into row 23. Remember, we need 2 values to make any change. We need a row number and we need a column number or column letter. In this case, we're going to use the column number, number 2, number 3, and so on. So we got to find that number. I know 23, but how do I know this is 2? How do I know this is 2? Well, if we go exactly 50 rows down, the 2 is placed here. So if we make a change to the task, the 4, right? Task type is one below is column 4, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and so on. So I've mapped these columns out here so that I know if the user makes a change right here, all I need to do to get the column number is look exactly 50 rows down. Whatever value is in 50 rows down, use that as a column number. Well, we did that just in VBA. So let's take a look. And of course, this is on worksheet change because the user is actually making a change. And of course, we want to make sure that we're focused on specific values. So if they make a change, we need to look for that. So let's take a look at that. And we can see on worksheet change, since we're actually making a change to the worksheet, in fact, it's 54 rows down. So let's take a look down here, scrolling down all the way, we'll see update the task list, update the task list. First of all, I want to make sure that when we make a change to K42 through P26, if the user makes any change to that, that's what we're going to be updating. And the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that it is an existing task. If it's not, it's a new task. How do we know if it's a new task or existing task? Well, we know that because of the value here in our queue in the task row. If this is empty, that means it's a new task. If it has a number here, that means it's an existing task. So we know the row. Otherwise, if it's a brand new task, we need to add a row here, right? So as soon as we add a row, we know that we're going to be able to add a row here onto that. So now as soon as we add an assign to, it adds a row. So what we want to do is we want to get the first available row. So either we're going to use an existing row or we're going to use the first available row. In fact, in this case, the first available row was 35, and that's just where we've added it. So that makes important sense. So we need to know that, and I'll update this so it's not 350%. So we want to add that row there. So let's take a look at that. So we want to make sure that, let me fix this. This should not be I, our row number. Let's take a look at that. We want to make sure that our row is now in M. We want the row. So let's update that, right? So we can fix that. Our row number is in M. So this should be M because we made an update to that database. M, we want the row, that formula to go in M. So that's very important. Okay, so if it's a new task, we're going to do these things. Let me make sure they're all up. A is the project number. H is the formula that we use for end date. Let's take a look at that and make sure that is accurate. End date is going to be in K, right? And so we want to make sure that that is in K. So let's go ahead and update that. I'll do that now. K, because we just made changes to that. And of course, that is going to be D and E. D and E, let's take a look at that and make sure that is updated because that is based on our start date, which is now in F. Our start date is now in F, and our number of days is in G. So we want to change that to F and G so we can get that updated. F, right, and G, that makes very important. G. So, okay, good. Now we've got that updated and make sure that formula looks correct. So we've got the row at M and K. Good. Okay. So we're updated on that. We want that formula to be K because we want that estimated end date. We want that to appear here, right? F and G is the correct. We want it affecting F, the start date, and estimated date so we can calculate that estimated end date. F and G is what it should be. All right, so now we've got that going on, and let's go ahead and take a look. So we've got 2 tasks. We know if it's an existing, then we're going to set the task row to Q, but if it's a new, we're going to get the first available row. Now we went over that, but we made some changes because we have that updated. So also, once we add a new row, so all of this is going to be if it's new, this is going to be if it's an existing task. So we're going to set the Q as the task row. Okay, so now we've determined all the information. Now what we're going to do is we're going to update the task list. We're going to set the task database column as long. What is the column? The column is that data mapping that I just went over with you. The column database column is going to be 2, 3, 9, 6, all based on the columns based in this task, right? So we need to update those. The column, of course, is going to be in 54, row 54, if we've made a change to 50. So that is going to help us. Let's continue on. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure it is numeric. And we're going to use the target row mod 2. That's going to get us our actual row. Remember, I only want to focus on either row 4, either row 6, either row 8, only the even rows. Not so if our target row is 9, if they've made a change, I want to get 8 as the value. And we can use mod 2 to make sure we get that value. So that's why we use mod 2 here, because we're going to. And if we add 54 to that, what is the cells of that? What is the cells of that? If it's true, if that's numeric, right, then we're going to update. So what we're going to do is we're going to get either 1 or 0 by getting the target row. So if the target row is 4, the mod 2 is going to be 0, so we don't add anything. If the target row is 5, this is going to be 1, right? So we add 1 onto that. So we add 1, so it's going to be 55. So it's either row 54 or 55. And that's how we get here into the row 54 or 55. Right? We know it's going to be 54 or 55. So that just shrinks it down automatically so if they select 7, it's automatically going to be 55. If they select 6, it's automatically going to be 54. So regardless, it's going to be on these two rows. We're using the mod row, the mod for that. So it's going to be based on that. So it's very easy, just based on 1 or 0. Remember, this target row, this value here is either going to be 1 or 0. 1 or 0. That means if they select an odd row, this is going to be 1. If they select an even row, it's going to be 0. Plus 54. What in the column, in the existing column that they've selected, and this particular row, what is the value? First of all, we want to make sure it's numeric. That means that if they find any other cell, anything that's not a number, it's going to return a false. So we're only focused on if it's true. Why is that? And that is because we need numbers. We need column numbers. I need numbers. So if they select here, anything here that's no number, nothing's going to happen, right? It's got to be a number. It is numeric. We have to make sure this is a number. Why do we need a number? Because we need a column number. We can't add anything in this table if we don't have the column number. If we don't have 2, 3, 4, we need that column number. So it's critical. So we need to pull that column number from this table here. So that we have to check is numeric. Is numeric. We're going to make sure that we're pulling a number here. That's got to be true. So we're going to find that row number. Once we have it, we have our task database column. We have that. Then all we have to do is we have the task row, right? We know we've pulled that automatically or created a new one. We know the column, and this is going to take whatever change we've made and place it into sheet 7. Place it automatically into sheet 7 on the appropriate row in the appropriate column automatically here. So it's going to place all that data right here. That is how we get any changes that we've made. And I'll leave this down here for you just so you can look at it and pierce through it so you can see what's going on with that. So that'll give you some idea. We don't need any of this data here. That's not necessary. All right, so we've got that, and now we've covered a lot of things. So I'm glad we've been able to key that project manager. I think I'd like to add some notifications if that's something you want, like automated email notifications, and that means that we would be adding emails onto these resources. I may add emails if that's something you'd like to see and have to automatically take and notate an email and send notifications to the resources based on maybe some change, some completion. Let me know if that's something you want to see, and I'll add that on to the future project managers. So otherwise, if you've got any additional ideas, let me know. I do appreciate you joining us for this training on Project Manager number 6. I hope you have found it helpful. We've got a great little project manager that we're developing, so I'm glad you like it. I appreciate all of your comments, your likes, and your shares. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.